Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Thanks so very much for tuning in to America Can We Talk? Today we're going to talk about Juneteenth, which is a holiday that's today. Women love socialism, but why? We'll be joined by Romina Boccia of the Heritage Foundation. We'll also talk with her about how bad America's debt is. Then, clips from Trump's 2020 announcement rally last night. It was wild. And last, Biden up by 10 points over the president. I don't think so. And last, why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk? I'm Debbie Georgatos. Well, today's a holiday. On this first five today, I want to talk about that holiday very briefly. It's called Juneteenth. It is a unique holiday. Many Americans have not heard about it, but the short story is that back on June 19th in 1865, in Texas, the General Gordon Granger, after the Confederacy has surrendered, was assigned the mission to come to Texas and to announce that the Emancipation Proclamation had actually happened. To be clear, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation effective January 1st, 1863. It was 2.5 years later when slave owners and slaves in Texas got the news. And so this General Gordon Granger came to Texas to read an announcement from the president about the surrendering of the Confederacy and about the idea that all slaves here in America were free. I love the idea that everyone celebrate this Juneteenth holiday. They obviously merged June 19th into Juneteenth. Texas was one of the first states that made it an actual holiday, I think in 1980 or so. And now there are 44 states that honor Juneteenth, and they have celebrations essentially celebrating freedom. But the reason I love it is because Juneteenth was one of the steps along the way, along the Civil War, of moving America toward what was to become a more and more perfect union. It was the idea that slavery was inconsistent with the idea of America, the idea of our founding, recorded in our Declaration and in other founding documents, essentially the idea that each of us we're all equal and that we're born with rights from our Creator. Those rights exist and are ours simply because we were born. Ending slavery, moving the announcement of slavery's having been ended by the Emancipation Proclamation to Texas was just another step along the way to bring us toward a more perfect union. I love celebrating Juneteenth, acknowledging it. I love celebrating when women got the right to vote. I love celebrating all sorts of history in America that ties back to the founding idea of a country rooted and founded on liberty. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. So I want to turn now. We have a guest joining us. I mentioned in our introduction today. We have her on phone, and her name is. First of all, let me just say I'm so glad she could join us because this is a great topic, and we hit this topic so often on this show. But I want to hit it again. Talk about the idea of socialism, and in particular, why socialism seems to appeal to women. And so we have Romina Boccia on the line. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. She's with the Heritage Foundation. I think we have a picture of her to show you. She is the director of the Grover M. Herman Center for the Federal Budget, Institute for Economic Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. She's a prolific writer. She testifies various places. She's on all sorts of national media. But I want to get her on today to get her thoughts about this poll that was done recently. It was an Axios poll, or an Axios on HBO poll, that essentially said, in America, 55% of women prefer socialism. I have a problem with this, Romina. So let me first of all welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So what do you think explains this? I mean, this poll is revealing in America that more women than men are sympathetic to or in some way drawn to socialism. What's your sense about why that would be?
I think it's because people misunderstand what socialism means and what it is and what it represents. Whereas traditionally, socialism was defined as government control of the means of production and distribution, meaning the government owning major industries and controlling major aspects of our economic lives. That's not what today's generation thinks of when they hear the word socialism. They hear social as something that is good, and so they consider socialism a more compassionate kind of economic system that takes care of those who are most vulnerable, that occupies itself with reducing inequality in society. So they're not thinking of the socialism of the Soviet Union or even what we're seeing in Cuba and Venezuela. They're much more thinking of a kind of coddly kind of state welfare system, perhaps more like Sweden and Norway, which those are capitalist nations, but they have extensive welfare states. So it's a question of definition. I think in this case, we know Gallup has found that people's definitions of socialism have changed significantly. There's been a major rebranding effort that's been going on to rebrand socialism as something good and nice. If you will, this is a Trojan horse, and it seems to be succeeding. So we have to remind people what socialism truly means, and then we can remind them of its effects, because we know just how this is going to work out, because we've tried it many times in history. Thankfully, never in the United States, and hopefully we'll never have to find out firsthand just what socialism really means.
That is a great answer. I love all the points that you made. I want to embellish on something related to what people think it is. If you think the government is going to be able to provide things for people, they don't. I agree with you wholeheartedly that people who embrace socialism today, they don't really mean they want the government to own the means of production and control all of the economy. They just want the government to adjust things to make things fairer. And fairer meaning there's concern for people of low income, people struggling, and somehow the government should make things fairer. But it always must involve an element of coercion. The government can't make things fair and get more money to some people without taking it away from other people. It is why I think you had written something about this. Socialism always ends up in tyranny. Do you agree with that?
That's right. And I think what we're seeing among many young people today in the United States, and also many of these women who responded to this poll favorably, is that they're conflating equity, a concern for fairness, for a level playing field, for opportunity for all, with equality. You cannot have equality and freedom coexisting, because what freedom brings out is that we aren't equal. We are equal. We should be equal before the law, but we aren't all equal in our abilities. We aren't all equal in our intellect. We aren't all equal in our motivations. We are unique individuals with different unique capabilities that produce different kinds of values in society. And somebody who works very hard, works extra hours, saves his or her money, we're going to find different outcomes when it comes to earnings and how much wealth that individual is able to amass than somebody who takes more leisure time, who enjoys spending their time in different ways than working, or who chooses a job that where they can have meaning, say in the nonprofit sector, over a more risky job, say working on an oil rig. We see all of these factors play out in how much people earn and how much they save and the wealth that they're able to generate. And this whole notion of equality of outcomes flies in the face of it. Inequality is a necessary outcome of our freedom to make choices. And it's very different from equity, which is about fairness, such that the person that works harder is able to make more, is able to earn more. And when you ask young people, do you really believe in equality? They believe really what they mean is equity, because then when you say, okay, say you worked really hard on the math test, you studied all night, you got an A, and the person next to you went out drinking with his friends and he got a C. Do you think it's fair if both of you get a B? Because that's equal, right? We'll take the A and the C and we'll give you both a B. And they all go, no, that's not fair. So you see, it's really about conflating equity for equality. But you can't have freedom and equality, because in order to make us all equal in terms of outcomes, like you said, it requires coercion, and it ultimately leads to tyranny.
Very well said. I love that example of the college grades and the the idea that you want the results of what you work to earn, and everybody does. Everybody does, whether it's their workforce and their grades in school and 1,000 other ways. We expect to have reward for hard work and labor. I love that example, and I'm glad you raised it. It's kind of interesting, though. There has been so much argument about in our society that, well, okay, some things are going to have unequal outcomes, but things like universal health care. That was one in this poll, one example of where women were saying, hey, we've got to have health care provided for people, and this just seems only fair. Health care is a right. And so it gets people thinking that this thing that can be provided by the government, access to health care, can be provided by the government without any impact on the quality, the access, the extent of health care. It's another myth that is just derived from ignorance about the role of free markets and freedom and the provision of health care and under a system that has freedom versus a system controlled by the government. But I think that leftists have succeeded in convincing women especially that health care should be a right.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and it does represent wishful thinking. Not wanting to consider that there are always trade-offs and that resources are limited. And we need some mechanism for allocating the limited resources that we have in light of unlimited human wants and needs. And the market, the free enterprise system, is the most effective and fair and just system that relies on individuals cooperating towards their own benefits, serving each other in the process, and it's the most effective mechanism for allocating scarce resources among competing uses. We wouldn't need to have this conversation if money was falling from heaven and
right.
There were no resource constraints. But when it comes to universal health care, the idea sounds very good. And in the United States of America, we don't leave people to die on the streets. Everyone has access to health care. The question is, how do we pay for it and what kind of health care? And we don't need to look very far to see what a Medicare for All proposal, which is a real proposal being considered in this Congress in the United States today, what that would look like. Because one of the requirements of that proposal is that all private health insurance would be banned. The government would control the entire healthcare sector. And you don't need to look very far to see how that's working out. You can look to England and their national health insurance system, and you can also look to Canada. And the way that those limited resources are allocated is via government rationing. And it is not universal access, and it is not fairly distributed. In fact, what you find is that those people who are politically smart, who are politically well-connected, who generally tend to be higher income individuals, actually are able to get more of the care. They are able to secure more of those nationalized resources for themselves. There is no equal and fair distribution in these nationalized health systems. Ultimately, what you find is worse outcomes. The UK, for example, has much worse recovery rates and also care rates for individuals with some of the worst diseases, like cancer, for example. They have higher death rates, and you have longer waiting lines and waiting for care, with some people dying, in fact, just waiting for care. So Canadians who have money, they come to the United States to have a lot of treatments done here because of those long waiting lines. And where are Americans going to go? If we turn to such an ineffective government-rationed system where bureaucrats control healthcare choices and decisions, where are we going to escape to? I think this is a very dangerous idea that is based on a wishful thinking that doesn't consider the realities of what government rationing actually means.
I just love everything you said. Thank you so much. I meant to mention to our listeners, we're speaking again with Romina Boccia, and she also, as well as being at the Heritage Foundation, director of the Grover Herman Center for Federal Budget, she also has a degree in economics from George Mason, a master's degree in economics from George Mason, and a bachelor of science in economics from George Mason with a concentration in data analysis, which leads me to a point I wanted to make. You explain things so eloquently and so well. It is incumbent on people on the conservative side to spell out the kind of arguments you're making, because to the uneducated or the person who hasn't focused on economics, it sounds like the argument between leftists offering free health care and people on the right offering free markets, and your responsibility to track down the kind of insurance you would like and find a means to pay for it and pursue and take care of your own health care. It's easier to sell the things that that the left wants to sell by just saying it's all free and it doesn't matter. But it is really counting on the ignorance of, in this particular poll, women and millennials, just not recognizing the fundamental economic realities that you are spelling out. And they're not that, sexy and exciting to spell out for people. They're just reality, though. They're just facts. And I think stories are so important for people to try to help Americans understand the dangers of these programs that are being pushed by leftists. There's Medicare for All, which is just basically socialized medicine. What really happens in socialized medicine countries? Why do the wealthy come to America when they can to seek medical care? The need to have that understanding spread, especially among women, is just an enormous need in our country. So I love that you're doing it. I have about 10 more topics I want to hit in our 5 minutes we have left. So let me start with. Let me start with you. Did some work related to where we are in the debt in our country. And the Heritage Foundation's had several pieces out. You've written and been part of, I guess, panels that talked about it. But, the debt is one of those issues where everybody will say, oh, yes, every candidate especially, I'm concerned about the debt. Yes, it's terrible. We have to get spending under control. And yet, it never happens. We go to Washington, or we're in Texas here, Austin, or wherever your state capital is, and the temptation of politicians is to spend to create programs to allegedly help people, and the debt gets worse and worse, and there never seems to be a political price to pay. People don't turn against their Congress member or their state representative, say, well, I'm not going to vote for you again because you didn't do anything about the debt. It seems with this problem, we all agree it's a problem, no political consequence, no incentive to solve it. So I'll start with just the idea. Can you tell us in an overview economics way, how bad is our debt? Give us some data points, help us understand how bad America's debt is.
Yeah. So one data point is the average or typical American household earns about $60,000 per year, working all year long. The national debt, if we divided it up by every American, not household, every American, is already over $67,000. Now, if you look at a three-person household, that's over $200,000. That is a mortgage without a house that is on the head of every American person, because the way the federal government is able to borrow in international and domestic markets is on the credit of the American taxpayer. It is with the understanding that Americans will be able to produce enough in terms of goods and services to be able to service the debt. And our interest is already rising despite these very low interest rates that are, frankly, artificially low because of Federal Reserve policy that is undermining the stability of the dollar, of our money in the long run. And even with those low interest rates, the interest on the debt rose by 30% over just the past 2 years. Imagine what your interest is, say, if you have a mortgage or a car loan, and that went up by more than 30%, by 1/3 over just the past 2 years. Many American families would find themselves in a bind to continue financing that interest, and that is what's happening with our country. Those are the numbers, the $22 trillion national debt on a level that hopefully more Americans can understand. It's already more than what the entire U.S. economy produces in goods and services on an annual basis. And that only accounts for the debt we've already incurred, that we've already borrowed. It doesn't take into account all of the promises, all of the unfunded obligations the federal government is confronting. Medicare and Social Security, they're going to run out of money in the near-term future for Social Security recipients. And this is not some far-off future for the next generation, but people retired today could be faced with a 25% benefit cut if we don't fix this program. Medicare is running out of money even sooner. That affects Medicare Part A. So the overall gap between these promises for just Social Security and Medicare and what we have set aside to pay with current tax policies is about $500,000 per person. So it's unbelievable. The numbers are staggering.
They are. And I'm looking at two different pieces that came from the Heritage website. And for our listeners, all the documents or all the articles I'm referring to today, you can find on our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, go down, list of links. Several little data points I'm going to pull out that I love your summary. I love putting it in the way that many people can understand the idea of your family earns this or your family's debt is this, but here's what your debt is for the country. But here's some interesting things. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid currently consume 72% of current tax revenue. So these are not programs paying for our military, not programs paying for the FAA keeping us safe or infrastructure, all these things we agree, especially the military. 72% of our current tax revenue is eaten up by Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But the one that really caught my attention, there are a bunch of facts I'll throw out. By 2025, the interest on the national debt, the interest on the debt will be more than defense spending. I mean, it is untenable. One last little factoid I was going to throw in, then I have a question for you, was the idea that, let me just find it again, interest on the debt will, spending on interest on the debt will exceed Medicaid within 1 year, and 5 years will overtake all defense spending. By 30 years from now, just interest on the debt will be projected to be the single largest federal expenditure. So, Romina, you're with Heritage Foundation. You guys are the idea factory of the country. Do you have a suggestion for Congress, like what they're supposed to do about this in a realistic way?
Yes, we actually have a plan, and we have had a plan for many years now, and we just released our plan for this year. It's called the Blueprint for Balance, and it contains more than 250 policy reforms to put the budget on a path to balance before the end of the 10-year period, which is the budget cycle that Congress considers, while making the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, because this is something that people also need to understand. It is not for a lack of tax revenue that our deficits and debt are growing at this enormous rate. It is actually tax revenue is going up even after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It is overspending. It is out of control spending. It is the fact that healthcare spending is growing at an average rate of 6% annually. Now, if you think about President Trump is proud of getting 3% growth, 3% economic growth.
Yep.
Healthcare costs are growing at twice the rate. And then we have Social Security, and we have other welfare programs, and we have all the spending increases that Congress has voted for, including just today the House voted on a package for $1 trillion in spending that blows through spending restraints. So we have a plan. It's called the Blueprint for Balance. It's available at heritage.org. The president's budget, President Trump's budget, includes about 61% of the Blueprint for Balance proposals. So we've made good progress in getting the administration on board with the vast majority of our proposals. They've also been introduced in Congress, more than half of them as part of the Republican Study Committee budget in the House of Representatives. But the budget hasn't gotten a vote. Congress is proceeding with spending money this year without actually having agreed on a budget. So what the American people can do is their lawmakers need to hear from them. They need to know that this is a serious issue that the American people care about and that the American people expect results. And the American people should demand that Congress pass a budget. There's a bill in the Senate by Senator Braun that says no budget, no pay. Senator Joni Ernst has a bill that says no budget, no recess. These are common sense proposals that say Congress's number one responsibility is to actually pass a budget. They haven't done that in so many years.
Yet
yeah. Spending continues. So that's the first step. We need to actually put in place incentives and enforcement measures to make Congress do its job, and it might just have to mean that we don't pay them until they get the job done.
I could go over that. I'll tell you, Romina, I found on your website, on Heritage's website, the blueprint for balance, the federal budget for fiscal year 2020. And I was actually going to print out the whole thing because I would love to dive into it. It was like 320 pages. So I settled for printing out the table of contents. And I note you had a lot of involvement in writing this and preparing, analyzing things. I think why I so appreciate Heritage is because you have so many substantive, serious experts who will take on the hard policy issues and give Congress a path forward. Because what I was saying earlier, what happens is there are people in both parties who run for office, and they do really mean that they care about the debt and the annual deficit, and they want to do something about it. But any proposals that anyone makes, even when Republicans attempted, whenever it was, 10, 12 years ago, to talk about making minor adjustments to Medicare so that or to Social Security, so that perhaps people who are not in financial need, maybe they get less, maybe you change the age of eligibility. Any effort to even touch any program is instantly vilified by the mainstream media, by the leftists in this country, and portrayed in some horrific way, pushing Granny over the cliff in the wheelchair. And so the idea that Heritage has put together this blueprint, I just think it gives candidates something easy to say. I want to fix the budget. No one person in Congress can, no one member of the Senate or House, but if we all got behind this budget, or at least this was the baseline of discussion, you give them a way to say, I'm serious about it and I'll vote for this without having to go out on a limb and say, well, I think we should cut X and we should trim Y and we should change this, all the things that can be so easily vilified. I love that you guys do this, and I love that you created this blueprint. So you just mentioned for our listeners again, but tell them how they can find this blueprint.
It's on heritage.org/blueprint for balance. And for additional educational tools around the federal budget, which is just so big and complex, we also have a website called federalbudgetinpictures.com.
Great. Well, I'm going to have to ask you to come on another time because I actually loved several things that you wrote and talked about. I can't get to them today, but I heard your commentary about the gripe that rich people don't pay their fair share and that nobody really got a tax cut, both of which were false. So I'm going to say, Romina, you are just a great guest. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. It was my pleasure.
Great, and I would love to ask you back, and we can talk about whether people actually, got a tax cut and who pays their fair share. So that, my friends, was Romina Boccia. She's with the Heritage Foundation, full of information, and honestly, they talk about issues that it's so hard for the average politician, the average member of either party, House or Senate, to get into the weeds on any particular things to fix the federal budget and the debt because it's so easily vilified, so easily attacked, and it just is easier for politicians to go to Washington, keep spending, thinking somehow, someday this will get fixed, and it really is at a crisis point. So love Heritage, love having her on. Okay, I want to turn today and right now and talk about President Trump's rally. I'm going to guess most people listening to this show also listened last night to President Trump making his announcement speech in Orlando that he is again running for president, that he's a candidate for the president in 2020. There were just it was a great rally, full of energy, full of enthusiasm. And I want to just share with you a couple of clips about it, but just really to talk to you about where he's coming from. So I believe my wonderful producer, Matt, has these, and he's so great to pull them together as I get them to him last minute. But here's President Trump last night in Orlando. This very first clip about taking care of citizens. If we can just play that one, that'd be great.
It's the great state of Florida. Very historic, because exactly 4 years ago this week I announced my campaign for President of the United States. And it turned out to be more than just a political campaign. it turned out to be a great political movement because of you. A great movement. It's a movement made up of hard-working patriots who love their country, love their flag, love their children, and who believe that a nation must care for its own citizens first.
Okay, what I want to say about that is President Trump really signaled in this speech last night, I think it was like an hour and a half or so, he signaled what he's going to run on in 2020. He'll add other things, he'll add other, policies and ideas, but he really signaled to America the central things he's running on. Number one, and this was why I want to play that one first, it was a shift in American political thought, a huge shift, to use the way he pronounces it, shift where back to the idea that the American government works to protect the American people, that our place and our role in the world, the government's role, is not to have abandoned borders, let everybody in who wants to come. It is not to put the interests of Americans in second, third, or fourth place in our trade deals, that we actually have a right to fair trade and to insist on trade with other nations that doesn't always disadvantage America. It had to do with treaties we had entered, a variety of treaties. He went through some of those. The idea, though, of that it's okay to love America. It's okay to have America's policies be in support, be supportive of the American people and the American economy. And so he's just hanging with us, America first. This was a breath of fresh air to millions of Americans in 2016 who watched what happened in Washington, watched the American left taking control of federal government and really treating America as though we really don't deserve to be great. We don't deserve to have policies that protect us first, that we are kind of apologetic and deferential to other countries, that maybe we really shouldn't have been involved in this or that. This was a guy saying no. Trump is saying no, actually America first. Second clip. This was he took several shots at the news folks who were there at the rally. Here's a quick clip on that.
By the way, that is a lot of fake news back there. That's a lot. That's a lot.
Okay. The reason I wanted to play that one is this. He took several shots at the media throughout the evening. And people who get upset with President Trump and say, well, he's not very professional, he's not very presidential, he shouldn't have said that. This is not just nasty, childish, mean-spiritedness. This is a president pointing out that the radical leftists who run the media in this country, the people who pose as mainstream media, but in fact spend all of their time demolishing, decrying, criticizing, taunting, just in every way demeaning conservative ideas, Republican politicians, conservative platforms and policies. This is Trump again reminding his listeners at the rally and everyone who watched on television, don't trust the media. They lie to you. They lie about Trump. They lie about every issue that there is. They lie about policies. They are leftists. This is a vital piece of the Trump effort to keep America together and keep America strong, is to keep Americans tuned into the fact the media hasn't suddenly become honest or fair. They are leftists, and he called them out over and over and over. The next clip I want to do, he talks a lot about the Mueller investigation, and there was this clip actually. He was making reference to saying the only collusion was between Hillary and the DNC. It was, and he was referring to two things about this clip. But the one I want to play next is this only collusion between Hillary and the DNC.
This was our chance to reclaim our government from a permanent political class that enriched itself at your expense. As I said on a wonderful, beautiful day at my inauguration, we did not merely transfer power from one party to another, but we transferred power back to you, the proud citizens of the United States of America.
Okay, I want to jump in and talk about this one. Trump did this over and over in the speech. Instead of saying, me, I did this. He constantly referred to his policies, to the advances, to the things he stood for as we, as a movement. He's including the audience, he's including the American people. And the thing that's so rich about this is, number one, that this is in great contrast to President Obama, where there used to be jokes about how many times he would say the word I or me. This is President Obama in speech after speech after speech after speech. He talked about himself and his greatness. Trump, much as people talk about him as arrogant and blustery, he has created a bond with millions of Americans who feel like he's on board with them, they're on board with him. They wanted this movement that Trump started. So he really it was a message of bonding with people. Now we'll get to the next clip, which was this collusion. He made a lot of reference to the Mueller investigation, a lot of reference to how the left has actually would not accept the outcome of the 2016 elections and essentially spent 2 years attacking him. There are like 3 clips in a row, I guess, on this. 3 clips in a row there, or 2 clips in a row. Hillary and the DNC.
We went through the greatest witch hunt in political history. The only collusion was committed by the Democrats, the fake news media, and their operatives, and the people who funded the phony dossier, crooked Hillary Clinton, and the DNC. It was all an illegal attempt to overturn the results of the election, spy on our campaign, which is what they did, and subvert our democracy. Remember, the insurance policy, just in case Hillary Clinton lost. Remember the insurance policy.
Okay, there were people in the mainstream media criticizing President Trump about his speech, of course, but criticizing President Trump in particular about going back to the whole Mueller thing. My friends, if President Trump did not mention in this speech launching his campaign for 2020 that he absolutely was grotesquely attacked, that he was the victim of a scandal, I call it a coup attempt from inside the FBI. If he didn't mention that, he wouldn't be Trump. He wouldn't be a normal human being. People do not take being vilified, lied about, attacked, maligned, headline after headline for 2 years, accusing him of something he didn't do, and then just say, oh, good, thank goodness they've dropped that, which they haven't dropped, by the way. They're still talking about maybe get him on obstruction. And so this is Trump. He's not going to let the Mueller thing go. He's going to have it be a central piece of the campaign moving forward. He's going to have the fake media. He's going to have the idea of America first is a moral, good, right thing to do. He's going to talk about the Mueller thing. And then the last thing, we got to, I think, skip one of the links I sent you, Matt, but there's one that I just imagine if the Dems were in charge. There's actually 2 of them. Imagine No Wall and the Caravans. This is, if you can play those, that'd be great. He had 2 clips to talk about what if the Democrats were really in charge.
And you know, we couldn't get the wall approved by the Democrats. Even though they voted for it 4 years ago and 6 years ago and didn't get built, but they voted for it. All of a sudden, Trump is president. We don't want a wall. Can you imagine those caravans without having the barriers and walls that we've already put up and that are up? This country would be a mess like you wouldn't believe.
Okay, this is going to be and it should be a theme over and over and over and over. The security of America. The southern border absolutely abandoned by the American left, having the American people start to envision you're going to put these people in charge, the Democrats in charge, who won't even fund the wall, who won't even fund Border Patrol, who see America, the beauty of our social media. America has seen video after video of people flooding the southern border, not just from Central America, but now we're talking about from Angola, from other countries in Africa. We have seen overrun the border, no possibility of capturing. The Border Patrol estimates they capture about 1 in 10 who cross the border illegally. So the picture of America with an overrun southern border has got to be a central theme. I got to quit with the clips because I want to tell you a couple more things and just do it in summary way. He actually talked about the idea, and I love he's planting the visual in the minds of the American people. What exactly would America be if we didn't have someone who wants border security running this country? He also did a great thing, which was he pointed again to the idea that the Congress, in entertaining the FBI, the whole attack on him that came from inside the FBI, the whole Mueller frame up, the complete frame up of a president in order to remove him. It wasn't just an attack on him, Trump, and on his administration. It was an attack on you, on the American voter, on the people at that rally, on the nearly 63 million people who wanted President Trump be president. What the left was saying in having the Mueller investigation go forward, in having the just complete witch hunt, false accusation, just capture the Congress's time and attention, what Trump drove home was that was an attack on the American people, on the very existence of the judicial system, the very existence of law enforcement, just the very existence of our country. So he did a stellar job. Nationally, the media didn't like it. I'm going to just tell you, I'm going to return to polling data in just one moment. But one funny thing, I guess, about the thing last night, the rally. About 6 minutes into the rally, CNN, who was there covering it live, like all the other big networks, and they've got a camera and they're panning, covering him. I mean, the place was packed. It was, wherever it was over capacity. It was a massive crowd. 120,000 people wanted to come. 20,000 got in. More people outside couldn't even get in. CNN pulled their coverage 6 minutes into the rally because at some point, when President Trump pointed to the media in the back and was saying, fake news, the audience started chanting CNN. And I hate to say this word, but CNN sucks. The audience started chanting that. CNN was so livid they cut their coverage of the rally and spent the rest of the evening griping about, President Trump is doing same old talking points. But really, it was an opportunity, and I want you to keep the visual in mind. If you didn't watch it last night, this 20,000 person stadium was filled to capacity, standing room only, crowds outside. 6 times as many people wanted to come as could come. People waited in line 40 hours to get inside to get a seat in the Orlando heat. So these are people very enthused about the president. But now I want to turn our last segment today and just talk a little bit about the polling. There has been polling recently showing that Joe Biden, is leading President Trump in key swing states by up to 10 points. And so I'm going to just remind you, when Biden did his announcement rally, he first of all, I'm pretty sure, did the announcement on video, so there's nobody there. And then the first rally he had a tiny crowd. I mean, it was under 1,000 people. So Biden can't gather a crowd. There were other stories I've talked about in the show before where a reporter shows up to cover a Biden rally and he got behind schedule. And he wrote this in his report. I got so worried I was running late. How am I going to get there? I got to get near the front, got to be able to take pictures. And he charges in. He realizes there's nobody here. I mean, there were a small crowd there. He easily made his way to the front row where he could take pictures. And how the cameras in the Biden rallies always stay focused on him. They never pan back to show the massive audience because there never is one. However, having said all of that, there is some bad polling data out relating to whether or not President Trump will win re-election. It's obviously very early, but I wanted to mention a couple key points about it. Number one, remember how wrong the pollsters were in 2016. Polls are only as good as the audience, as a selection of the people polled, whether those people are representational of actual voters. But even given that, there was a story out about how President Trump had pollsters on his team. His internal campaign team hired pollsters did some polling and discovered some not good numbers. He was behind Biden. Someone apparently on one of those people hired by his campaign leaked those numbers to the media, showing that Trump was down in some key states. And so Trump fired which you should, of course. You can't have your own team leaking stuff to the media. But there are several polls out that carry the same message. A Quinnipiac University poll, usually very reliable. They have people saying basically, this is Quinnipiac saying in Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren would beat Trump. In California, Kamala Harris, only by 1 point. I think that's one's dubious. Beto O'Rourke in Texas would beat Trump. They even have Buttigieg, this former South Bend mayor, would beat Trump. They also have Bernie Sanders leading President Trump 42%, and Biden leading Trump 50-41. So Quinnipiac has some bad numbers out. The GOP is getting nervous about that. But there are some recent numbers saying that Trump is already kind of cutting into Biden's lead in the very key swing states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. I don't want to blithely dismiss these polls because it is of concern. When you look at our economy, you look at our strengthened national security situation, you look at the jobs coming back, you look at the wholesome, amazing economy, you look at the economy, best employment numbers for women, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, all these numbers, people are working. And people always say at the end of the day, people vote their pocketbooks. Well, it can seem alarming that there is not the just obvious, Trump ahead, he's got it won, cakewalk kind of polling numbers, but they aren't there right now. But I want to raise, I guess, at least 3 points. Number one, President Trump's campaign manager for 2020, this guy Brad Parscale, he dismissed all the polling. He said polling is the biggest joke in politics, and basically said it's impossible in the modern world to get accurate polling based on who actually votes. Second, just keep in mind what happened in Orlando. You had, as I said, 20,000 people there, 40 hours wait, 120,000 requests of people to come, wanted tickets, and CNN, having a hissy fit and leaving, is down basically 30% in their viewership. So even though CNN, moans and whines and complains and shoots arrows at Trump, no one's listening to them. The last thing I'll say, within the 24 hours after the campaign ended, the rally ended, in fact, it's not even 24 hours, less than 24 hours, the Trump campaign raised an additional $24.8 million. People heard the rally and they liked it. And if you watched the rally at all, you saw that the enthusiasm for Trump is through the chart, is off the charts. So I want to just we're got to get to why it matters to you, but I want to say this about polling numbers. It is incumbent on the average Joe American, on you and me and everyone we know, to be advocates for this upcoming election, because the media is against Trump, and because whatever he does or says is contorted and lied about, and he is a non-traditional candidate. He does not speak in a way, in fact, there was polling out saying that the majority of Republicans find the way President Trump speaks to be kind of off-putting. We have to be the spokespeople, you, I, everyone who cares about this country, for what has happened, the tremendous progress in this country under President Trump. We have to be persuading our friends and our neighbors. Number two, if the Republicans in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate would begin to back President Trump instead of shying away from him, which almost all of them do. You could name on one hand the number of Republican members of the U.S. House or Senate who strongly, consistently, stalwartly stand up for President Trump. I think Trump's numbers would be much better. He would look better in various states and to his own voters had there been support from the Republicans in the House and the Senate for President Trump. You need to urge your congressman, your senator, to do that, to step up. The idea that Trump pretty much had to fight alone with, I'll give a few exceptions in the U.S. House, Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Matt Gaetz, pretty much, Trump had to fight alone the entire FBI, national security apparatus coming after him with a bogus, framed up hoax accusation. And he should have been surrounded by the Republicans, House and Senate, decrying this. Maybe, just maybe, between now and 2020, those people in Congress can get the message that they need to be seen supporting the president, helping the president. I think it'll help us poll numbers. It'll help the perception. But really, I think, at the end of the day, with all of this polling, which is always unreliable and it always depends who they ask and all that, I don't think a sane person could take a look at that rally that happened in Orlando and decide, I don't think Trump's in trouble. The people are happy with him. And you know what, my friends? I'm going to have to do this. I see we're out of time on my happy time clock here. I have prepared what I almost do at the end of every show, which is why it matters to you. They're great slides, why it matters to you. I'm going to have them up at our website, which is americacanwetalk.org, but I run out of time today to get to them. And I'm really sorry about that because I love ending the show showing you the slides about why these things matter to you. But I don't want to go past my time here at my happy studio at Real News PR and Real News Communication Network. So I'm Debbie Georgatos. This is America Can We Talk. Thank you for tuning in every day. Please come every day, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, so we can talk truth about America. If you're watching this on Twitter, this is our first day we have the show. It always goes out on Facebook Live. It's always on YouTube. And now it's going out on Twitter, on Periscope. So if you're watching on Periscope, this is my first time putting the show out on Twitter. Please share it. Please share this page. Please like this page. Follow me on YouTube. Subscribe to me on YouTube. My show is all about preserving and saving this precious country. I'd love to have all of us on board trying to do that. I'm Debbie Georgatos. Speak up for America because America matters. Talk to you tomorrow.
America, can we talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear